Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Disney's first full length animated feature and Disney's first princess. But did you know that there is more than one Snow White in the Disney canon? Oh, yes. And I'm not just talking about the upcoming live action movie. We have a few different Snow Whites. So, will the real Snow White please stand up? Hello and welcome to my podcast and channel, Rebel Geek, where we focus on and talk about what I like to call the feminine fandominon, or what others may call women-centered media or feminine-centered pop culture or media. I am your host, Belle Diepa, and today we are talking about Snow White, and I am in my Snow White best. I have my unique vintage Snow White dress, and I am ready. Now, Snow White is an icon. She is the moment. She is also the very first Disney princess that Disney ever made. Now, Walt Disney has had many great achievements, and he's made his mark on the world. But among his achievements was the creation of the first ever full-length animated feature film, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, in 1937. Insert applause. Applause. As of the making of this video, the live action film will be released March 21st. So this is releasing a couple of days before, and I intend, hopefully, to make a reaction video, a real review of the movie like I've done with other movies. But I am personally very, very, very excited. And although there has been a lot of comments about that movie, we're not going to talk about any of the negativity. This is not the channel for that, just FYI. But if you want to talk about Snow White and the different iterations of Snow White, then yes, you have come to the right place. So first of all, who is Snow White? Snow White is a Disney princess and the protagonist of her film, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. She is also a part of the Disney Princess franchise. The Disney Princess franchise was established in 2000, also known as the Disney Princess line. You may have seen collaborations of the Disney Princess line. For example, Bath and Body Works recently did a collaboration where they released soaps and bodies and not bodies, body soap and hand soap and candles. The line consists of 13 characters within the franchise. The 13 princesses of the Disney Princess line or Disney Princess franchise are Snow White, Cinderella, Aurora, Ariel, Belle, Jasmine, Pocahontas, Mulan, Tiana, Rapunzel, Moana, and Raya, and Merida. I almost left Merida out. I'm sorry, Merida. Everyone has their favorite Disney princess. My personal favorites are Snow White, Ariel, and Belle. Now, I have to say, I was born in the 80s. I won't say one of the 80s, but I was born in the 80s. I was born before the movie The Little Mermaid came out. So when I was like a little kid, like 3 or 4 years old, I was super into Snow White. And then Ariel came out and she changed my world. And then Belle came out and my name is Isabel. And so I started going by Belle because we had the same name. And it was just like, I know, I'll get back on track. Sorry, guys. But while Snow White is my personal favorite, she has consistently been ranked as the least favorite princess for a lot of people for many years. In 2020, WDW Magazine held a poll on the correlation between age and the most popular Disney princess. Their thought was your favorite Disney princess was very likely the princess that you grew up with when you were a child. So Ergo, I grew up with Ariel, Belle, and I did grow up with Jasmine, but I think that by the time Jasmine came out, I was starting to I was really stuck on Ariel and Belle, especially Ariel. But what they found in the poll is that Snow White, she was ranked as number 5 in favorite princesses, but among the voters, the average age was 50. Now, guess who number 1 was? Belle. And a lot of these voters were mostly millennials during the time. So the average age of the millennials were, in their 30s, they grew up with Belle. Interesting, right? Other similar rankings were done, one by Gold Derby and the other one by Ranker. In Ranker, she came out at number 18 out of 20. She beat out Giselle and Kiara from Lion King 2 Simba's Pride. And in 2021, BuzzFeed did a ranking of official Disney princesses, and Snow White came in last. Yeah, that's not good, guys. Most of the critiques and complaints of Snow White has more to do with how people can relate to her. They feel that Snow White is very passive, that Snow White that her story does not resonate, especially because she was so young. She's the youngest of among the princesses. So in order to understand the generational differences, we need to get a better understanding of the 1937 film and what was going on with her design then. The idea to make an animated film came to Walt Disney in 1933. He wanted to create a film based on a fairy tale. According to the book, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the creation of a classic by J.B. Kaufman, Snow White was Disney's favorite fairy tale. Kaufman explains Disney wanted the film to have a real feel. He really wanted the film to be grounded in reality. So things like the movement, he used real-life actors that they filmed. The set, the design of the well and the castle, even facial features were human. But the personality traits of Snow White were still animated. The book states, quoting, "Snow White herself, in terms of design, is anything but realistic. Her body proportions are not those of an actual human being, and her performance is conceived in terms of her personality like that of other animated characters. Think of characters like Betty Boop, Felix the Cat, Mickey Mouse. These characters were very cartoonish in their personalities, which is basically the kind of personality that Snow White had." In the book, Disney also really tried to make the romantic story between the prince and Snow White work, because at the end of the day, in his mind, Snow White is a romance story, a romantic story. And he wanted to do a sort of meeting where one of the ideas that they threw around that they mentioned in the book is that Snow White created a scarecrow, and it was called Prince Buckethead. And she was singing to Prince Buckethead, and then Prince Buckethead, the actual prince, walks by and sees her and falls in love with her, and that's how they meet. They did not use it for this, but it sounds very, very similar to how Aurora meets Prince Philip, who also goes into an eternal slumber. Interesting correlation, right? But it totally makes sense on why a modern audience doesn't resonate with Snow White from the 1937 film, because she, first of all, her personality really was not rooted in humanism and in being a human. And what Walt really, really was prioritizing in the making of the film was the art. Actually making a full-length animated film that it could feel real. So this is why when you see the film, you see things like the water crashing when the witch is trying to push the boulder down and the lightning strike and all of the effects. It really is a groundbreaking piece of art and cinematic achievement if you watch Snow White through the adult lens. Or if you're just like very tired and you're sick maybe and you're like, oh, I want to watch something, but I don't want to watch something too intense. Snow White is a really good film for that because it's so calm. Like the music is so sweet. Just FYI, that's what I do. But in a lot of the princess rankings, as I mentioned earlier, Snow White was really disliked because of her passiveness. She was harshly critiqued for being only 14 years old in the original film when she falls in love with the prince and he randomly kisses her and takes her away to the castle in the clouds. And mind you, Snow White is still one of my favorite princesses, but that is a little weird. She was 14. Other critiques have been that Snow White is seemingly helpless on her own, and that oftentimes she's overshadowed by the more colorful evil queen, who I can't lie is also one of my favorite villains. But throughout time, Disney's portrayal of Snow White has changed, starting with, for example, the 2011 show Once Upon a Time. I love that show. Once Upon a Time is produced by Disney. It ran on ABC for many years, and ABC is owned by Disney. Therefore, Once Upon a Time falls into the Disney canon of princesses. They even had an exclusive STCC doll, which are still my Grail dolls. It may have been a D23, not STCC, but they did have very special dolls that they only made like 300 of them, and they are very coveted dolls. I want them. Anyway, and Once Upon a Time, Snow White is depicted as brave, hopeful, a rebel. She escapes the wicked queen and meets the prince by chance in the woods, and he gets caught in one of her traps, I think. But their story of how the prince and Snow White fall in love, it takes more time. And this Snow White is very different from the 1937 Snow White. This Snow White is fighting for her life. She is a rebel. In the original Snow White, she runs away and she hides. In the Once Upon a Time Snow White, she's not just hiding. And even after hiding for a while, she kind of has a type of Simba-like moment, and she comes back to try to get her throne, and then the curse happens, and you guys got to watch the show. It's actually a really good show. I might rewatch it again because I love that show. It's so good. What you learn from that show at the end of the day is that it's all about family. Screw Fast and Furious. Once Upon a Time did it first, I think. Well, anyway, the point is, Snow White's Once Upon a Time is vastly different, and it falls within the Disney canon. And maybe you're into video games and you did not see Once Upon a Time. But if you are into video games, you have Snow White in video games as well. You have Mirrorverse and you have Kingdom Hearts. In Kingdom Hearts, her personality traits consist of kindness, and she does get startled easily. But she is one of the princesses of heart whose heart is required to open the final door of Kingdom Hearts. And in Mirrorverse, she's just a plain badass. First, let's get into her stats. Snow White is... I almost dropped the book. Snow White is a melee character. She wields a blade, a pickaxe called Thornhammer, has a blade of natural obsidian, and her rosewood armor is made of rough barkwood and magically strengthened flowers and leaves. In the game, she's basically like a badass, like druid melee fighter. Yeah, like if we play D&D, like honestly, I kind of want to make her stats for my next D&D game that I play. And in Mirrorverse, you don't just have reimaginings of Snow White, you have reimaginings of other characters. Belle, Ariel, they've all been retooled for this video game and for this audience. And even if you don't play video games, maybe you play Lorcana. In Lorcana's Snow White, I don't know how to play Lorcana yet, but visually it is stunning. And if you look at this Snow White and you look at her stats, she is giving paladin vibes. And I kind of feel like, to me, it makes sense. Although, if I was to say the princesses, the princess that would probably become a paladin would be Mulan for sure. I kind of like the idea of Aurora becoming a paladin because I've seen really cool fan artwork. But I think that Snow White, it would make sense maybe, but I think she's more of a druid in my book than she is a paladin. But let me know in the comments. Do you think Snow White's a paladin or a druid? What do you think? Or maybe games aren't your thing and you are like me and my other favorite girl, Belle, and you like books. Well, have I got a book for you. In 2015, Disney Hyperion Books launched a series of what if style books called A Twisted Tale. In the 2019 book, Mirror, Mirror by Jen Kalanita, they did a retelling of Snow White with the twist of the wicked queen poisoning the prince. In this twisted tale, Snow White bravely saves the day. She is the one who saves the prince and is overall it's a darker and sadder story, but let's be real, fairy tales were kind of dark and sad, so it kind of like makes more sense. But in the book, instead of Snow White being helpless and running away, Snow White goes out to try to save the prince, and they have a little more of a relationship. Now, I have not read the book Mirror Mirror, but it's definitely on my list. And honestly, it sounds really cool. All of the kind of what if books sound really cool. I have not read all of the Twisted Tales. I do have the Beauty and the Beast one that I need to check out. So maybe I'll do a video on that. Let me know in the comments if you guys would like for me to do a video on the Twisted Tale books, because I would love to do that. And next in our canon of Snow Whites, we have the 2025 movie starring Rachel Zegler. So the 2025 movie, I have not seen it yet, but it is an updated version. It's a musical movie with new songs, and it's a different type of Snow White. Snow White is no longer dreaming about a prince. She's dreaming about becoming a leader, which totally makes sense for our modern era and something good for little girls to look up to. If you have a daughter, I don't have any kids, but like if I do have a niece, and I do not want my niece to grow up thinking that the best thing for her life is that one day a prince will save her. Because let's be real, you don't save the prince and the prince doesn't save you. You save yourself and then you save each other. That's my self-help book. So, of all of these, the movie, the 1937 film, the book, the video games, which one is the real Snow White? All of them. Yes, all of them. Look, if Marvel can have a multiverse and RDJ can come back and play Doom after playing Iron Man for like almost 10 years, then Disney can have a bunch of different Snow Whites that live in the multiverse of the Disney fairy tale. Like, come on, guys. And in our year 2025, it makes so much more sense to have an updated version of Snow White. The director of the upcoming Snow White film, Mark Webb, shared his thoughts about taking on the film in the most recent D23 magazine, saying, "I had just had a daughter, which made me think more deeply about the kinds of movies I want to make. They are creating a Snow White for this generation of kids." And who is this generation of kids? Who is Gen Alpha? Well, according to US Census, 47% of children from Gen Alpha identify as non-white. Gen Alpha is the most diverse generation in history. Let that sink in. It's one of the reasons Encanto, Moana 2, The Little Mermaid with Halle Bailey were so successful. These movies are resonating with a diverse audience because children today are diverse. It is our reality. It's what's happening, and it's great and it's beautiful, and we should continue to meld. So while people may have their opinions and may think that it's strange that Disney is redoing a movie, which by the way was done 87 years ago. Like, I feel like enough time has passed that Disney can decide to make another Snow White. It's not that weird. It's not that recent. But while some may have opinions on the casting of a half Latina, half Polish woman to play Snow White, it is a choice, and the update of Snow White as a character is a choice to resonate with today's audience and with today's kids, because kids want and deserve to see themselves on screen. They want, and yes, there is something to be said about, well, they should make new stories. And that is exactly what Encanto and Moana is. But I think that there's a special place in all of our hearts for fairy tales, and there is room and space for these fairy tales to grow with us and to change for different generations. And although I'm very, very, very excited for this Snow White, I know that this Snow White isn't directed necessarily to me and my generation. I'm going to enjoy it, but really it's directed to kids. Also, we should not forget that in 1937, the critics called Snow White Disney's folly. The critics did not believe at all in Disney's vision of doing a full-length feature animated film. It had never been done before, and it is what propelled Disney into the stratosphere. So a reimagining of a classic fairy tale with an unconventional cast is in line with Disney. And Disney, I think that they're taking positive and very smart risks. They're not like risky risks. They're not like out there. But given what the comments have been, and given how children have been reacting to this film, it seems like they know what they're doing. But let me know what you think. Which Snow White is your favorite Snow White? Animated Snow White, Mirrorverse Snow White, Lorcana Snow White, Once Upon a Time Snow White? I love all Snow Whites. Snow White is, like I said, one of my favorite princesses. And I'm very, very excited for this movie. But that's all I have for you guys. Until next time, be safe, and I'll see you soon. Bye.